Hi, thanks for coming to my talk on Survey Design Essentials. I'm Catrin and I'm a Senior Consultant here at Nimble Approach. So in this video, I'll be talking about common mistakes that could ruin your results. These are just kind of general hints and tips once you've kind of got that survey already there. So first one's talking about the length of survey. So you don't want to try and cram too much into your survey. You don't want lots of long questions like open-ended questions, matrices, things like that. It could ruin your results because if the survey is too long, it's taken the user too long to complete, they're more likely to drop out. Attention span is a real thing. You want to try and cut it to be as short and relevant as possible. So to do this, you need to minimise the number of long questions, things like open-ended, things like that. Try and minimise as many of those as possible. You want to only ask essential questions so it's not too long. Think about the general question or the problem you're trying to solve that I've spoke about before. You want to ask essential questions. They need to be relevant. You really want to make the most of branching questions. So I've spoken about branching questions before. They are where you ask a user a question, and then it kind of branches. If they say yes, they might get more options. If they say no, they might get a different set, or it might skip it completely. This will just make it shorter for some of those users. Some survey software does use an estimate on how long to fill it in. It will kind of do some sort of long algorithm. You want to try and make it short as possible. 10 minutes is like a really good length for a survey. You don't want it much longer than that unless you really have to. You need to tell them in the intro how long it's going to take, but obviously use your common sense with this. If you really need it to be a bit longer, just make sure you're setting their expectations. You need to use the right language. So using complex language, using jargon, using bad grammar, things like that could really kind of ruin it because the user might not understand exactly what it is you're trying to ask. This is where, you can't assume that they all know the same jargon as well. Things like if you've got a user where English is not their first language, or they've got something like dyslexia, it might really cause problems for that user and then they might drop out. You're discriminating against a whole bunch of people there as well because you're not making it accessible for them. So this is where you want to ask feedback. Content designers are absolute magicians when it comes to words. So it's really good to get a content designer to kind of have a look through your survey and just check the language. If you don't have access to a content designer, that's fine. There's the Hemingway app. You can check the reading age. You want to try and make it as low as possible. I think depending on your audience, it might be good to try and set that at about 10. You want to avoid jargon as much as possible. If you can't avoid jargon because you're asking very specific questions from a specific user group, you just need to make sure you're explaining those terms clearly. Any kind of abbreviations as well, acronyms, you want to spell those out just to make sure there's no confusion. Be bold as well. They've already agreed to do your survey. You don't need to put the word please in every question. It's just going to add extra words. It's just going to make it longer. They've already agreed to do it. Just don't use the word please in there at all. Next is kind of ignoring low responses. So you've sent out a survey, you've done everything right, but you haven't had enough results. So you don't have the information there to do full analysis. It could ruin your results because you've got no results if you're going down that mindset. But there's lots of things you can do if you are getting low responses. So you want to make sure you do things like send them a reminder to complete the survey. Some people might say, I haven't got time now, I'll do it later, and then completely forget. If you can give them a deadline to complete it, unless it's an ongoing thing, that's different. But if it's not, give them a deadline. They've got a date. You can set a reminder then to kind of let them know before the deadline as well. Still look at those results as well. You might not have many if there's small findings, but you can either use them as hypotheses or you can use them as unverified findings. There's still some sort of baseline that you can use. And lastly, you want to look into why the responses were low. Use it as a learning opportunity. Every failure is just another learning opportunity. You can have a look. Is there anything you can do to make it better? Is there anything you can do to try and get more people? You might not have sent it out to enough, but have a look into why. It's a learning opportunity to make sure the next survey is going to go better. So if you don't test your survey before sending it out, you're in a hurry, you haven't got time, there's a bit of a deadline, and you've got stakeholders who are really pushing for it, it might end up that questions are not showing up properly because you haven't checked something. They might be in the wrong order. Branching questions might not be working properly, so they're not getting the options that's for them, and it doesn't make sense. You've got people then that are going to have to either force their way through by kind of answering something and carrying on, or you're not going to get the information from the right people. Worst case scenario, test it with anyone. So go through it yourself first. Go through every kind of different route if you have got branching questions to make sure it works as you expect. Ask literally anybody if they will just go through the survey. It might not make sense to them, they might not be your target user, but they can still check that things, sort of make sense if they understood kind of what you mean by a certain term. Like I've mentioned already, content designers are the best people to try and help you with this, but also literally anybody can help you just make sure it all works and it's all kind of in the right order. It might be possible to get one or more of your target users to try and complete the survey. This is a great to test it. They're exactly the type of user that will be going through it. If you're doing a massive survey for a really large kind of population, it might be that it's really good to kind of send it out to a small group of users, get them to test it and see if they come back with any issues, and then roll it out to everyone else. Thank you. That was my general tips and tricks for Survey Design Essentials.